This is a chessvideos.tv training video, and this is a guide to checkmating with a bishop and knight versus just a king. Now, this position occurs very rarely in actual games just because ending up with this kind of material imbalance at the end is just very unusual. But I think it's helpful to know how to do this because it's interesting, so out of curiosity, but also because it illustrates some things about how the bishop and knight work together, and also how we can use not only them but also the king to sort of corral the enemy, the opposing king. So I just picked sort of a random position, and it's white to move here. And the first thing we want to do is force the black king to the edge of the board, or ideally the corner. Now, one note about these kind of positions is you can only checkmate in the corner that is the same color square as your bishop. So in this position, we could only checkmate in a dark squared corner, so either A1 or H8. The light squared corner, we can't deliver checkmate. We could only maybe stalemate. So what we're going to have to do is force the king, the enemy king, from the light squared corner to the dark squared one. So as a defending point, if you want to make this as hard as possible on your opponent, if you're on the weaker side, head for the light squared corner. And because it takes so long to checkmate this way, in some lines 31 moves from this position, you'll want to put up as stubborn a defense as possible because you have good chances to draw. But the first step, we're going to obviously look at how to do this from the stronger side. And the first step I like to do is, if we can get all of our pieces in the center here, then just because the black king can't occupy these central squares, he's already going to be pretty close to an edge of the board. And this is going to see black putting up the most stubborn defense, and there are lots of possible variations, so it's important to notice the ideas of how these different pieces are working together. So the bishop is attacked, so just bishop e5, king e3 for example, and we're going to try to get our king into the center, and that way we'll already have forced the black king closer to the edge. King d4, bishop d4, check, king e4, and now after king c4, the king is going to have to step away from the center and one step closer to the edge of the board. Here, king f5 is possible here. Black chose king f3, and now king d3. Now, another thing we can exploit is we know that if black is putting up a strong defense, he's going to head to the light squared corner. So while we could play king d5 and it would be good, we know that probably after king d5, black is not going to play king f4. So king d3 makes sense. Now king f4, bishop e5 check, king f3. And now we've got king d4, and this is just sort of a waiting move because now black can't waste any more time staying near the center of the board. He's going to have to move either to e2 or g4, and those are the farthest points away from the corner that he can stay. So he tries king f2, king e4, and now you see that the black king is slowly being forced to the edge. King g2, king e3. And now really the only choice for black is to stay in this corner. He can come to, say, h3, but after king f3, we're already, a decent way along in the process of forcing him up to h8. I'm not going to go through the whole lines doing that here because we're going to look at a similar line shortly. But you'll just know that if you can achieve something like this where you've shut him out of the light squared corner and he's on the edge of the board, you've already made a lot of progress. So after king e3, black's going to play king g1. It's really the only try. King f3, king h1. So now we have the position where we forced black to the corner, but it's the wrong color corner. So this is pretty much the critical position for these kinds of endgames, is you're going to have to force the black king from h1 all the way to a1, or up to h8. I chose to do it from h1 to a1 because it's a little easier to follow. So here we're going to start with bishop g3, and the first goal is to control the squares behind the king. So as we force this king, say, to g1 and then f1, we're going to want to control the squares behind him so he can't run back into his corner. King g1, knight e5, and this is just starting to get the knight into position. We want to bring the knight close to the bishop and king because the bishop and king alone are not enough to force the king to sort of shepherd the king over into the opposite corner, as we'll see. So king h1, knight d3, and we can finally see that we're bringing the knight to f2 to control this light square because the bishop obviously can't control a square, so we need to use the knight. King g1, knight f2, finally we're controlling h1, so the black king has no choice but to step one step closer to a1 and ultimately checkmate. So now bishop h2, and this is sort of a standard idea, bringing the knight to f2, shutting it out of h1, and now we've brought the bishop to h2, shutting the king out of g1, so he has to come to e1. Now the position starts to get a little bit trickier because we need to somehow reposition the knight so it controls f1 without letting the king escape. So we come to e4, and now this is the first critical juncture. There are two possibilities for black here. Black can either try to head back for the corner and slow white down, or black can try to escape the net because he's a little bit faster than white king and come to d1 and c2. So why don't we first look at f1. We're going to look at both possibilities. So he's taking the stubborn way, but now again we've maneuvered the knight so he can control f1, the light colored square. Now it's forced to come to e1, and now we have king e3. Now the king has no choice but to come to d1, and now as you'll see he's threatening to come out of c2, so we got to come to d3. And now the king comes back to e1. But, and this illustrates a nice principle again, when we use the king to control this square and the knight controls this square, we can play bishop g3 check, and the king has to head back to d1. And now again we're going to need to maneuver another theme. We're going to have to maneuver the knight so that we can control d1. So we play knight c4, just as we played knight, I think we played knight e4 earlier in a similar idea. So we play knight c4, king c1, and now one possibility is, I think the best move is bishop e1. This is sort of a waiting move. It's repositioning the bishop on the queen side, so it'll be ready for action here, and also just waits to see what black does. King d1. We'll look at this first. Bishop c3, and now we're ready after king c1 to play knight e3, controlling this square. So black has no choice but to come to b1. And now, of course, we can't smoothly bring our king to c3, so we got to come to c4 to reposition the king to b3. Now, black can attempt a2, but he's really still forced into the corner. So if he plays king c1, we just have king b3, king b1 only choice, and finally bishop d2, king a1, and now we have mate in just a few moves. And this is a standard mating pattern here. Knight c2 check, forcing the king away. Then, note how the bishop controls c1, we play knight a3 check, forcing the king into the corner. The king has no escape squares. Bishop c3 checkmate. So, as we saw, we forced the king all the way from h1, step by step to a1, using the knight to control the light squares, and using the knight and king and bishop to keep the black king from escaping the first rank. So let's go back a little bit. Instead of king c1, if, say, black tried king a2, that's another possibility, trying to sort of break free and make a run for that corner, we just have king b4, and he's got to come to b1, and then king b3, and the mate is the exact same. King c1, we have to give up a tempo. And that's another important idea. If you can't play bishop d2 right away, you give up a tempo, force the king to come over, and now take control of c1. Actually, let's do it with bishop a3. King a1, and a similar mating idea, knight c4, king b1, knight d2 check, king a1, bishop b2 mate. So we've seen two more ideas, and that one shows how when black tries to get away this way, we can just use our king to hold him in. So going back a little bit farther, instead of king d1, trying to take the approach where black constantly tries to run back the corner, let's try king b1. And the point of this line is that maybe he can slip away through a2 and b3. But as we see, king c3, king c1, and now knight e3 controls the light square. And so we're going to have checkmate through a very similar manner, giving away a tempo, and again, checkmate. So as we see, the lines from after knight e4 running back to king f1 are not going to be enough because we have the knight d2 check idea and then running the king over here.